Thank you very much, Dr. Rajan. Can I request that you take a seat? We're going to have a very quick Q&A. And as you said, that was a very, very interesting speech. It was a good long speech, but I'm sure there's a lot to take away from that. And there's a lot of pressing questions for you as well, as you can see there on the screen there. But I thought I'd start with the first question, which is obviously you're the chief advisor to the government of India now, but you've had many varied roles, not the least the chief advisor for the IMF. Now, a number of years ago, in 2005, in fact, at what was effectively Alan Greenspan's leaving do, you made a speech that was very prescient. Basically, you predicted the financial crisis to come. You said there were worries about overinflated assets in the US and elsewhere, and the financial system did indeed collapse, just the way you predicted. Now, if you were to look into your crystal ball, which it seems you've set a precedent that you can predict these things, what would you say is the future for your country, India? Can we all hear?
Hello, hello.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, okay. The danger of making predictions is if ever you're right, people think that you have some insight. First, I think it's very hard to predict short-term events. So you're not asking a short-term question, but I get this all the time from journalists. What is growth going to be next quarter? And I say, well, I really, if you must, I'll give you a number. But in some sense, it's like asking a doctor, think of us as doctors, maybe you think of us as quacks, but think of economists as doctors, and you can't ask a doctor, what will that be the patient's temperature tomorrow? You have no idea, but you hope that the medicines are going to kick in and start working and will take the patient in the right direction. But as far as India goes, to my mind, what I started the talk with, growth is a no-brainer, does hold. That if at all we grow substantially below the high single digits, it is because of our own problems, not because we don't have the capacity to grow at that rate. So I think from where we are in terms of per capita GDP, we should be looking at least 20 years more of strong growth, provided three things. Provided the rest of the world doesn't become problematic in a deep way, provided we fix some of the governance issues that we've been talking about, and I think they are in many ways eminently fixable. And third, provided politically India hangs together. And that is why I think equally important is to pay attention to the democratic process, to feed that in the right way, to make sure that growth is inclusive. I think inclusive growth is not just a matter of sentimentality. Inclusive growth is a matter of hard-headed realism. We cannot leave a significant part of our population, whether they be focused in regions, whether they be in the tribal areas, we can't leave them behind. It's a criminal waste of resources in the first place, even if you don't care about the moral issues, which are very big. But also I think it eventually comes back to rebound when you have that kind of inequality on the system. And so we cannot allow that. Now, how to do that in a careful, managed way, to move away from a pure welfare society, which I think is very difficult for a poor country to afford, to a more enabling society, which I think we need to become, is sort of the challenge of the moment, the fight in some sense that is going on in India today.
Now I'm going to go to these very pressing questions on the screen. They've been changing as you've been speaking, but I think what's really interesting is you talked about the struggle between democracy and growth. And so obviously the first question is, if you were minister instead of an advisor, what would be the things that you'd be able to do that you're not able to do now? So show us how democracy really works.
Well, in some sense, the minister, the finance minister, very able and energetic minister, and I enjoy a good rapport. So obviously he in his seat does different things than I do. But I don't think there's a big sort of amount of daylight between our views on some of these issues. But let me ask the question in a broader way. Supposing I sort of was a dictator for a moment in the government, and I could say exactly what we need to do. Well, clearly, I think what we need to do faster is get some of these stalled projects back on track. In a sense, people talk about the political difficulties in India today. To my mind, the big issues in the immediate future are not political difficulties. The big issues are implementation. We need to get the big projects back on track, going more strongly. I think that would be one very important factor. The second issue that I think we need to deal with over the medium term is education and skill building. I think our strength is our people. We need to equip them to do the right kinds of jobs, to do the jobs that are emerging. And like every country in the world, we're struggling with how to create that educational system that provides those appropriate skills and knowledge to our people. A lot more needs to be done. It's not going to be done in a day. But if I were to pick a short-term problem which needs solving, it is get the projects done, get the coal on stream, get the power projects on stream. That's one. And the medium term would be education and skill building.
All right. Time for perhaps one last question. That was great. Yes, applaud. I think, obviously, you've talked about the challenges that India faces. A lot of these challenges seem quite intractable, one of which, of course, is one of the questions that have been receiving a lot of votes. What are your thoughts on eliminating corruption in India?
It takes two to clap. We have corruption, but we're not Scandinavia. We have a different society. We have a different culture. And we have different values. Now, I'm not saying our values are conducive to corruption. I'm saying that we need to work within our value system to bring about a change. There's no doubt that there are areas in India which are relatively free of corruption. So we can do it. We can do it. We can have good governance. We can have transparent governance. But we have to facilitate that process. We can't sort of, in a sense, imagine overnight the same guy who has no compunction about keeping his home spotless but throws the garbage outside the window is going to change around and have a public purpose and stop bribing or the bureaucrat on the other side taking the bribe. We have to find ways to clean this up. And my sense is that the magic new sort of tool we have is information technology. And if we can use it, we can make a big dent, certainly in the petty corruption. Now, the grand corruption, the corruption around grand contracts, some of that can go away through careful design of contracts, through more competitive processes. But if you look across a number of industrial countries, they haven't completely got rid of that grand kind of corruption. What they've got rid of very easily is the petty, or to a large extent, is the petty corruption. Though in the state where I lived in for 20 years, Illinois, we still had 3 governors go to jail for a long time for petty corruption, corruption in the license office and so on. But we can deal with the petty corruption through information technology. One example, tax refunds. Used to be a big source of harassment for people. Today we have a center which is set up just to automate the process of tax refund. If your refund is in order, there are no outstanding questions about your document, and that can be checked electronically, your money goes out without human intervention. Once you get to that process, for that kind of structure for many government processes, it will bring down the level of harassment, the level of day-to-day corruption. And the absence of corruption, in the same way as corruption, tends to feed on itself. When the norm is to be straight, I think then people don't want to violate the norm and start being crooked. We have to take lessons, of course, from the great city that we are in, Singapore, on how they managed it, because I don't think Singapore was as clean as it is today. In the past, they worked on it. And taking lessons from places like Singapore, from places like Scandinavia, one of the things that you see when you go to Scandinavia, across those 4 countries, the extent of transparency. Everybody knows what their neighbor makes. And once they know what the neighbor makes, if he indulges in the kind of conspicuous consumption that we see in Delhi, somebody is going to turn him in saying, this guy is spending far more than he owns up to in terms of income. I'm not saying we need a police state. I'm just saying we need to draw lessons from around the world as to how we can bring down corruption. I don't think there's anything inherent in us. It is just that we have to become less tolerant towards it, and that requires a change in attitudes and a change in capabilities such as technology.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that brings to an end the Q&A. Very insightful comments there, Dr. Rajan. I'd like you to stay on the stage, because at this stage I would like to invite some very special guests as well. We have, of course, the former President Nathan, Mr. Girija Pandey, Sanjeev Iyer, and Renuka, to be invited to present you the Distinguished Alumnus Award.
We were supposed to do this in the evening, as Dr. Rajan will not be able to join us for dinner. We decided to move this ahead. It is called A Faultless Life. He has an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from IIT Delhi and an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a PhD in management from MIT. He is the Eric J. Gleacher Distinguished Service Professor of Finance at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business and the Chief Economic Advisor in India's Finance Ministry. He was the Chief Economist at the International Monetary Fund. He was also Chairman of India's Committee of Financial Sector Reforms. He's known in global economic policy circles for a paper he wrote on the growing risks in the financial system years before the collapse. His research interests are banking, corporate finance, and economic development, especially the role finance plays in it. His papers have been published in all major economics and finance journals. His book, Fault Lines: How Hidden Fractures Still Threaten the World Economy, won the Financial Times Business Book of the Year award in 2010. He also has an earlier book, co-authored with Luigi Zingales, entitled Saving Capitalism from the Capitalists. He was awarded the inaugural Fisher Black Prize, given every 2 years, to the financial economist of age under 40 who has made the most significant contribution to the theory and practice of finance by the American Finance Association in 2003. He believes there is a lot that we can learn and do that doesn't need to be grand, and that small changes can make an enormous difference. He is Dr. Raghuram G. Rajan, and it is our privilege to confer on him the Distinguished IIM Alumnus Award in recognition of his outstanding achievements and contributions to his profession, to the IIM brand, and to the world at large.